Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I am speaking with Dr. Richard Liu, President and CEO at SolarBank Corporation. Dr. Liu, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Sean, and glad to be here.
You have delivered over 100 megawatts of solar projects and have a gigawatt plus pipeline. What has you excited right now about the future of our industry?
The future is bright. And every day I'm looking forward to get up, open the curtain, and to see, the light is there. Sean, I tell you, the future is truly, truly bright. You see, the thing is that we convert light into electricity. There's no substitute for electricity, right? And we don't pay for the fuel to produce electricity, right? So future is certainly bright. Not only bright, it's good for SolarBank.
What do you think is the biggest misconception commercial real estate owners and operators still might have about solar and how it might cost them money versus be beneficial?
I think it comes to mind my three things. As you know, we have done hundreds of rooftops with property owners like Home Depot, the world, and Fiora, and so on and so forth, right? Those are the people already see the benefit, right? But I think the first thing they say, it's an encumberment of my building, right? Encumberment of what, right? You have a piece of a liability over your head, which is roof, right? You have to pay for it, and no one's paying for it, right? We can actually turn that liability into asset, right? So that's one. The secondly is that, that thing is so expensive, who's going to want it? No, solar is already great parity. Actually, it's cheaper than retail price. In New York, for example, we're selling solar power at a 10% discount to their retail price. If you do it behind the meter, you are certainly cost you less, right? And thirdly, they say, well, you're going to ruin my roof and causing leaks. Well, if you do it yourself, or if you have the fly-by-night people do it, it could happen because, it's a membrane system, there are certain procedures you can do and so on and so forth. It won't. We have about 100 rooftops under management. Roofs are the least single year. Yeah. So
I love it. Why don't you quickly, for any listeners at home who don't know about SolarBank, can you tell us a little bit about why the company exists today and what your goals are for the future?
So SolarBank is a developer and owner of renewable clean energy assets. We are a Canadian and US company, and we list on NASDAQ. So what we do is the development, permitting, construction, operation, and ownership of those assets. At the end of the day, we are here to deliver power to keep your lights on and to keep you connected.
I love it. What do you think is driving the shift that you recently mentioned? A lot of folks are embracing solar. What do you think is driving that shift for owner operators viewing solar as a cost center to actually seeing it as a value add investment?
Sean, if you look at this one, as I mentioned, electricity is a necessity of life, right? You need electricity, right? Electricity is getting more expensive, right? Because, the tariff increase, the cost, the utility simply passes through the cost to the ratepayers. I'm a ratepayer myself, right? So when you look at all of those ones, you say, first of all, how do I reduce my power cost? Solar is grid parity. When you have this piece of glass under the sun for 35 years, it always produces as long as there's a light, right? Yep. So that's the number one, right? Number two, when you look at the other technologies, so on and so forth, it become acceptable. It become available. Right. So that's another reason that, people say, oh, I can do this, I can do that. Right. And the thirdly, obviously, is the broader acceptance. Solar being around for, my first solar project started 2003. I'm in this for 22 years already. Right. I think over the time when people look at it's cheap, it's available, it's reliable, and let's have it.
That's winning a lot of different ways. So in addition to solar, we're seeing quite a bit of growth behind battery storage. How do you see that enhancing energy resilience for commercial property owners, especially during things like grid outages, which seem to be increasingly happening?
Sean, that's a very good question because, traditionally we have the power generator that go down a wire and go to the ground, right? And if the wire's down, there's nothing, you just stay in the dark, right? Yep. However, when battery storage technology advanced now, that you can actually, as emergency backup, right? So lots of people have, power walls and so on and so forth. So that's a emergency backup. We are building 3 large-scale battery storage in Ontario for the grid. It's
Wow.
basically to support the grid when in time of needs, right? More than that, people are always thinking, oh, electricity expensive. Electricity is expensive 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 6 o'clock dinner time because everyone need electricity.
Yep.
It's very cheap in the night. In Ontario, some rates are 2 cents a kilowatt an hour.
Yep.
So you can actually charge the battery and discharge the battery in the day. So that give you economic advantages, right?
Mhm.
And I think, from my perspective, I would say the grid resilience, right, need a combination of supply and also energy storage so that keep the supply meeting the needs of the society.
Love it. What do you think is the biggest barrier today preventing more commercial real estate portfolios from adopting renewable energy at scale?
I think, it comes down to, the question you asked before, right? It's really a way of looking at the future,
Mm.
and in the past, right, the building owner operator kind of people, they will always depend on the grid, right? As the grid become more expensive, as the stress put on the grid is higher and higher, the reliability, the resiliency is a concern, right? So if that's a concern to the owners, they will do it. Right. Another thing is that, when you look at those one is that economic driven, right? If you are paying for the electricity, that, if you can get a cheaper source of electricity, that's a gain economically. Right. I think thirdly is really the societal change. A lot of people now are very ESG oriented. A lot of people understand the carbon emission issues, the global warming, so on and so forth. As a building owner, that you want to making sure you attract, top level tenants, right? So those other things is a driving force.
And now, how do you think those property owners, when they start to consider whether their building is ready for solar or even battery storage, what are the things they need to consider before integrating a renewable energy system?
I think first of all is that look at your economics.
Yeah.
If you are paying electricity at a cost is of your concern, you need to looking for alternatives, right? So that's number one. Number two, you got to look at your building. For example, if you go a high rise that like a very very tall one in New York City, you're not considering solar because the roof surface is like very very small, right?
Yeah.
So it's the construct, right? Having done that, now you look at, we have a mechanical, structural, civil, electrical engineers on staff, right? So there's engineering review about the structural and so on and so forth. Right.
Yeah.
So those are the things of evaluation that we actually do for a lot of property owners. Right. When that is done, we will do a proposal and for them to consider. I would say, it sounds very easy, just a piece of glass and the sun, you can just slap them on the top. Easy said than done. There are professional things. So it's better to have a, professional company like SolarBank to do it professionally so that it can last more than 35 years.
You bring up a really good point, Dr. Liu. If a building owner with what seems like a perfect large flat roof for a system, if the roof is older, it can sometimes be a great time to look at doing both a roof assessment and maybe a new roof at the same time as looking at adding solar to that site. Is that right?
You must know something about it. And actually, most of the times, a building owner look at this one, will contact us and we go there, we say, how many years of your roof, life left, right?
Yeah.
Perfectly will be 20, 30, 15 years is great, but if there's still 5 years left, we usually look at the condition, look at the structural that will actually, help them to redo the roof so that
Yep.
way you can lessen the weight and you can pick the right type of membrane, 60 mil, 80 mil versus other types and so on and so forth. And actually, it makes the project more attractive, more sustainable.
That's nice full scope service you're providing there.
Yeah.
Now, how do you think evolving utility rates, you mentioned the costs only seem to be going up, and the grid instability, like I mentioned earlier, do those make the business case stronger for using behind the meter on-site energy generation?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
If you think about it, let's say everyone is using time of use rate, right? Depends on the demand and supply. That's the way to managing it, demand response, right? So with the utility cost increase, one of the ways is to put behind the meter energy sources. You could use battery, you could use solar, and that way that when you producing power in the hot day, and that's where the electricity is most expensive, your cost is lower, right? When you have cheaper electricity in the night and you charge it, at 5 cents, 2 cents, whatever. And in the day, when you get into 15, 18 cents, you can use it. So there's a lot of companies provide those services. We call it demand response. And not only beneficial for the building owners, it also benefits the grid. Right? When I was talking hydro, we were able to install certain, control units on air conditioners and so forth, so that when the grid is really stressed, that we can slow down the air conditioner a little bit, because that time there's not many technology can generate electricity. You can only reduce the consumption of it. But now you can do both.
You mentioned some of the other spaces you've worked in outside solar and battery storage, and I know transportation solutions and hydrogen was one of those. How do you see fleet electrification impacting those large corporates and CRE providers?
I was one time I was looking at some studies that, our civilizations start with burning wood and to coal to gas to oil and, gradually become renewables and actually so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, what is the lasting energy, right? The lasting energy is from the sun, right?
Yep.
So the sun, create wind, create lights and all of those ones. But you got to start to think about not everything can carry a solar panel around, right?
Mhm.
Not everything can have a wind turbine on the back and drive it. Vehicles, for example, right? They do, you could use EVs, electric vehicles, for charging them for the, I would say, commercial use. But there's
Mhm.
lots of the long haul trucks and so on and so forth, right? They probably better suited for liquid fuels, right? Yes, we still have pretty abundant, I would say, gasolines or diesels and so on and so forth. But as we're moving forward, one of the form is to produce hydrogen and the liquefied hydrogen or even gaseous hydrogen through fuel cell turn electricity and electricity driving the drivers and to move the car forward. So I would say, hydrogen is certainly a mix of all forms of energy. I think, it is certainly a substitute future choice for the places where diesel and gasoline are most prevalent this time.
Beautiful. What do you think is one renewable energy trend in commercial real estate today that maybe some leaders even are kind of unaware of or might be missing?
You probably heard that the building everyone, trying to get is a LEED building, which is really
Mhm.
about, environmental energy management, control, and so on and so forth, right? So now we got net zero buildings. So
Mm.
net zero buildings means that you actually can use the energy, generated on site. I saw buildings that they no longer have natural gas. So what they do is they have rooftop solar, they have geothermal, and they have the grid as a backup. Now,
Mhm.
more than I would say almost they can achieve net zero, right? So now, if you are starting to look at the building, you say, how do I actually reduce the emission? How do I to reduce the cost? You would consider, solar rooftop, right? You will consider demand response. You would consider geothermal. And with EV and heat pump, all those technologies, you can actually attract more, I would say conscientious,
Mhm.
customers or tenants to the building. So it really depends on the building owner's view. There are building owners saying, you know what, I'm just providing a box and the tenants covering everything. So yeah, sure. Right. But what is the sustainability? Right? How do you actually make your property more attractive? How do you making sure your tenants are loving your building that so that you can have a sustainable business? Right. So those are the things I would say there are technologies that integration could make it, very, very attractive.
I love that. Actually caring about the tenant experience and satisfaction is beautiful. And I mean, on top of that, though, a recent guest of mine was telling me how they'd done the assessment and the buildings where they focused on adding solar energy have actually increased the value of that building when they go to sell it. And so the benefit is really two ways for these properties.
Absolutely. So first of all, when you have a roof, when the UVs and beat on it, it heats up. You think about you put a box under the sun, you will test the temperature inside, the temperature will increase, right?
Yep.
The solar panels actually create two things. One, they reflect the lights, the
Yep.
heat. B, they create a gap between the roof and the panels, so that's insulation, right?
Yep.
So from that perspective, you're not only providing a benefit to the tenant from a cooling, from a thermal protection perspective, you also prolong the life of the roofing system.
You mentioned some clients you have like Home Depot and others who have solar at many different properties. For any portfolio owners of multiple assets, what do they need to think about when they start scaling their renewable energy efforts across multiple buildings? What are the operational challenges they should think about?
I think the first one is the overall planning and determination, right?
Mhm.
You not only as a building owner, you need to consider your asset value to increase, but then you also need to consider the tenant's needs. Some tenants has a lot of rooftop equipments, right? So that need to be taken care of. Some of the leases are actually, have the right of the usage of the roof belong to the tenant, right?
Mhm.
So you need to making sure there's a fair, equitable consideration of that, right? At the end of the day, when you do the implementation, that the tenants are operating a normal business. They usually, if they are not using the roof often, and usually we access the roof from the back and so on and so forth, that we can quietly construction usually takes about 3 months, that can coexist with the tenant operation very, very harmoniously. But there are times you need to coordinate, right? Because this is something good for the environment, good for the tenant. So communication is another important thing that to making sure it's viewed, and appreciated versus, oh, it's just something that just happened. No one knows what's happened, right?
You've overseen a lot of solar deployment. Is there maybe a creative commercial real estate renewable energy project you've seen that you'd like to share about something unique in the way someone executed their investment?
I would say there's a street in Toronto called Alliance, and there's
Mhm.
building a 501 Alliance. And, the gentleman owns the building and he wants to create the building to start with as a lead building and
Sure.
as talking and so on and so forth. And he decided to get this building to a net zero. Right. So we installed the rooftop solar because it's a two level building. So we installed a 300 kilowatt system on the top. And he really benefited. He looked at his electricity bill, and he's really enjoying it. As we're going forward, and he used lots of natural gas to heat it, right?
Yep.
So we also do geothermal and renewable energy, right? So we look around and we started the technology and so forth. He was able to do a geothermal, and he now is no longer using natural gas, right?
Wow.
So now he's looking at this one to see, on the lower level, if I could do another solar, right? And then I can actually, truly be net zero. And also, as part of the renewal of the building. And that's what he is pushing for. So in the building got appreciated by the city, by the tenants, right? And a lot of green tech companies moving to it. I even saw Walmart, I think they are the advertising department there. You can see, creative people in and out there. You would never think so because the building is in a very, very old areas.
Yeah.
Now it's standing out, you know,
So solar plus geothermal. That's really cool.
a heat pump and battery storage, EV charging,
You mentioned earlier considerations for the tenant. How are tenant demands on their property owners affecting the way that those owners approach energy infrastructure for their buildings?
I think, the number one, the tenant need to consider their cost, right?
Yep.
And usually they pay the bill, right? So electricity cost is a major concern, so that they will talk about this so on and so forth. In the past, and the landlord say, hey, I'm not making money. It's a grid, but you can actually say through your hand in the air, say, what do I do? But the more aggressive, a landlord will say, you know what? Actually, we could put a rooftop solar, and because of the net metering, we can actually reduce the cost. That's what Fiora is doing. We're just finishing 1 megawatt rooftop for them in the airport in Calgary. right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And the second thing, people are talking about the overall environment, right?
Mhm.
Of course, everyone like the nice working environment, but everyone's view is a little different, right? But however, with the generations moving forward, we can see the building is nicer, the building is a little high tech, and so on and so forth. So that's another thing, a feel good factor, right? So now I push to the last one is the overall societal approach for the environmental, social, and the governance side of things, right? It matters. I think I would say proactive landlords consider those things and then, make it a pleasant places so the people to go. I think, there are already LEED buildings, there are net zero buildings. Those are attracting certain, class of tenants that to the building.
What advice can you provide building owners and operators on mistakes to avoid when they're implementing clean energy solutions?
Never ever do it because you like to make a statement.
Right.
No, it's a utility.
Mhm.
It's a long lasting infrastructure, right? So number two is that I'm sure we are all very, very technical, we're all very, very competent, but you wouldn't want me to be the chef when you go to the restaurant. Same with solar. I know the principle is very easy, but we go through surveys, we go through engineer analysis. So we actually go on site, to do this layouts and so on and so forth, right? Those are the two advice. Don't do it because you want to have a statement and get professionals.
There's sort of three legs of the energy stool in today's renewable energy world of solar, battery storage, and then EV charging. How are you seeing EV charging infrastructure become a competitive advantage for CRE portfolios?
Remember you were asking me that, what's the best, solution for a integrated building, right?
Mhm.
So you have solar that produce power when the electricity is expensive, you can use it. You maybe produce too much, you put it into the battery, right? So when your car is coming in, if you just charge it from the grid, you have huge demand that will increase your demand cost of the grid, right?
Yep.
So now with the integration, you're actually not taking the power from the grid, you're taking power from the battery. Right.
Mhm.
So that manages the demand response, good for the grid, good for yourself. Right. Now thinking another way, your battery size is only limited, right? But there's a big battery in your car, right? There
Yeah.
are V2X vehicle to a lot of things.
Yeah.
GM cars, there's quite a few cars, Tesla, so on and so forth. Even I saw advertisement that people camping that they can take electricity from the battery in the car, right? So when you integrate all of those things, you can really realize the technology advance, from a cost perspective, from a convenience perspective.
I hinted at this earlier with past guests, but I would love your direct perspective on really what effect or impact does renewable energy have on property valuations? What have you seen at your time at SolarBank?
We have done a couple of hundred of those. And
Yep.
very beginning, everyone says it's encumberment, it's will reduce my property value and so on and so forth. I think the jury is still out. There are surveys and so on and so forth that can only give you our experience,
Yep.
right? We don't do residential, so this is purely of a commercial.
Yep.
For commercial buildings, when you're selling the building comes with revenue, right?
Yep.
So you either have lease revenue because we own it,
Mhm.
or that your tenant, enjoy a cheaper electricity that they will be stay there for longer, right?
Yep.
So you're eliminating a lot of turnover costs, right? So those are the ones, we experience.
Now, there's been a number of incentives in this industry for some time coming from the government, and there's also regulations. So there's sort of a carrot and stick scenario shaping the economics of renewable energy investment. What do you think the future sort of looks like as it relates to incentives and regulations, and how will that impact development of renewable energy in commercial real estate?
So at the very beginning, and because of newer technologies, as well as everything that, the government has certain policies, regulations to direct investment into the area. In the US, you have the investment tax credit. In Canada, you also have the flow through mechanism to direct investment into certain areas, such as, environment carbon capture, in a lot of things, even a long time ago in oil and gas, in the mineral exploration. right? So that's the, I would say, regulatory side of things, right? On the other hand, you want to have the market have enough supply, so the cost of reducing. If you look at solar over the last 20, 30 years, so I remember when I started 2003, I paid probably $6 a watt. Today, we pay 40 cents a watt. You can
Wow.
see how much the speed drop, right? So those incentives are actually, driving down the cost so that you have a massive market acceptance. But having been in this business for more than 20, 30 years, I would say, solar is at grid parity already. And incentive becomes, I sometimes consider them as a ways to distribute the social wealth rather than a necessity to have a project to depends on incentives.
If your average property owner today was looking ahead 5 years into the future, what advice do they need to hear from you today to make sure 5 years down the road, they're not kicking themselves saying, why didn't I consider this investment?
I will certainly ask them to review the energy forecast from their utility, from their state, so on and so forth. In Ontario, I saw the latest forecast that electricity will be 18 cents a kilowatt hour.
Wow.
Solar produces electricity probably 10 cents a kilowatt hour and it lasts for 35 years, right? Do you want to wait till when it's 18 cents a kilowatt hour do it, or you want to do it now? This is about future proof, right? And secondly, that as energy security resiliency become an issue, right? You don't really want to be the building that at the outage that you are dark while other buildings are still operational, right? So impact your bottom line, right? So those are the things I would say are very, very real. And the thing is, Sean, it's not difficult, even though there are technical standard operating procedures. It is about a piece of glass on a rack sitting on the top,
Yeah.
So do it.
And 10 cents versus 18 cents today. And do we believe that it'll be 18 cents 35 years from now? You're protecting against those price increases in the future.
Yeah, not 35, it's 10 years. 10 years.
Yeah. Amazing, Dr. Liu. I'm going to switch us over to some lightning round questions. So just your quick hit on some of these thoughts. Solar, wind, battery storage, something else. What's your bet for the fastest growing renewable energy investment by, say, 5 years from now?
So let's put the policy influence aside, right? Over the last, I would say, number of years, renewable energy is the fastest growing source of energy in the United States, right? I believe in the last 15 months, solar was about all the new generation coming online, right? So given the maturity of the industry, given the maturity of the technology, given the more advanced technology, right? I would say the solar industry now, can move forward without the incentive. And not only that, benefit the property owners, the real estate property owners, but also I think there are building integrated photovoltaics. You saw the news about people installing plug and play solar system in a balcony in UK. You hear people put on the side of the building as facade and so on and so forth. So as energy become essential, as the demand of energy from AI, from crypto, from all of those increase, you only have limited supply. So as the economics become more severe, and there'll be more and more adoptions, especially in the populated area. We're not talking about a huge, 500 acres of solar farm somewhere in the middle of nowhere. We're not talking about taking, I would say, agricultural land and so on and so forth, but distributed, behind the meter, integrated building. I would say in 5 years, it will see a lot more prevalent than today.
Amazing. I hope so. Is there a property technology solution you've seen or used lately that just got you really excited about a unique way someone is solving a problem?
So we have a request from a large pension fund owned property, owner. They said, we want to do fuel switching. which means that they want to switch the natural gas out, like 501 Alliance did, right?
Yep.
So when we look out there, we're looking at their needs, so on and so forth. We do their assessment. We say, okay, the grid can only give you this much electricity. That's by design, but you have a huge roof, huge parking lot. We did some geothermal and so forth, and it's probably okay. But then we walk in the building and we look up, and there are space heaters using natural gas. Right, the warehouse, little square thing, right? And we look at this one, they are there. They say, well, those are the ones mainly taking natural gas, so we will need to remove them, right? So we say, okay, we can do some heat pumps and so on and so forth. But when we do the calculation, we say, wow, that's need a lot of electricity. Of course, because thermal needs is usually half of the energy needs of the whole building, right?
Yeah.
And, at the very beginning, it's shocking. But after you sit down, you say, yeah, the grid give you half, and we can create another half, right? So the building is happily moving forward, right? You can see, if you're just looking at the technology, as a standalone, you will say, no, we're not doing the fuel switching. We're not going to decarbonize because, it's going to cost lots of electricity. Yeah, sure. But where is the electricity coming from? It's from the sunlight, right? And you don't have to burn always the heater because the geothermal provide a base environmental control, right? So really excited about some of the advanced real estate companies thinking of this.
I love it. Okay, complete this sentence. The biggest myth about green buildings is?
It's for sure. No, the biggest myth about green buildings is for sure is completely false.
Yep.
The green building come with new standard, new design, new impact, the tenants' happiness on the environment, and also future proofs.
Well said. Last question. Pretend you are a huge portfolio manager investor. You've got unlimited capital. What is the first sustainability upgrade you would make across your portfolio?
I want to see energy efficiency, but I knew, Sean, if I say energy efficiency, everyone's thinking, oh, he's going to install energy efficiency, this and so on and so forth. Sean, we human beings are not very good in controlling ourselves.
Yes.
We want the bigger, faster, more, and so on and so forth, right? But you can be bigger, faster, higher, taller, whatever, by using the energy more efficiently, including, the new generation on site, including environmentally friendly technology, including readily available technologies. You think about the lights, right? In the past, 100-watt lights, will truly burn 100 watts electricity. Now, same lighting, 6 watts will do.
Yeah.
You didn't get less light, right? But how much electricity did you use? You only used 12, right? So that's what I would say. If we have unlimited capital, I think, we really need to look at the totality of how do we manage the energy, not only at the residential commercial level, the data centers, for example, 25% of their cost is energy. Wouldn't it be nice if we can have those energy costs under control so that, my phone bills can be a little less than what it would be now?
Dr. Liu, this was such a pleasure. If people want to learn more about you or SolarBank and the great work that you're doing, where's the best place for them to go?
So we have a website, and obviously, we welcome you follow us. We welcome you to sign up for communications. And, Megan is the investor relations person, a wonderful person. And, she's always getting back to you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you again for joining me on the show. To all my listeners, thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Sean Swentek. See you on the next episode.
Thank you all.